Well, Julie and Heather, welcome to the Moms of Tweens and Teens podcast. I'm so happy to have you here.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, we're talking about some really important stuff today that parents are really struggling with right now, and that is sleep and getting our tweens and teens to sleep, especially coming out of this pandemic. And you both have written a book that's called Generation Sleepless. So we're going to dig into that. But first, I'm so curious for you to share how you met and came to write this book. And this is not your first book that you've written together. You wrote a sleep book for parents and caregivers to help their babies to get to sleep.
Mm-hmm.
So I would love to hear a little bit of your what you're up to, what you're doing, and how you met. So
Sure.
Heather, you want to go first?
Sure. So, that is exactly how we met. Julie and I were working with new families, so families who have babies and little kids. And we felt like there was something missing from the conversation around baby sleep. And so we wrote The Happy Sleeper to help parents reconcile these two kind of what seemed like polarizing camps in baby sleep. The sleep training and cry it out kind of idea versus attachment parenting and emotional attunement and responsiveness. We felt like these two polarized camps made no sense, and parents felt like they had to sacrifice one for the other. And we wrote The Happy Sleeper to say, you can have excellent sleep and an excellent emotional attachment to your baby, and here's how. So that's how we met, and we wrote The Happy Sleeper a number of years ago. And so we've been working with families for many years on sleep. But what we started to notice from the research and in our clinical practice was just how teenagers are really the ones who are suffering the most. They're the ones who really need our help the most. It's in every research study that you look at about sleep. Teenagers are the most sleep deprived population ever in human history. So they're the most sleep deprived of all of us. Babies, little kids generally get good sleep. About 60% of adults get good sleep, but only about 10% of teenagers get healthy sleep. So it's an absolute drop off and a complete crisis that hits, in high school, starts in middle school, hits in high school really hard. And we wrote Generation Sleepless to say, this is a major crisis and we need to fix it. And we all need to come together to do that.
Wow. And so you were both at the same practice, and that's how you met. Therapy practice?
We weren't in the same practice, but we worked in the same fields, and our paths overlapped. And once the first time we met, we couldn't stop talking, and we realized how much we thought alike and how much we both felt there was something missing from the discussion about sleep. So whether you're talking about babies, little kids, or teenagers, our starting point with sleep is that sleep is natural. We're all born with the ability to sleep well. It's very hardwired into our brains. And that's sort of part of our message also to parents of little kids and babies. But with teenagers, it's the same thing. When you take teenagers out on camp, researchers take them on camping trips where they eliminate, artificial light and technology and all these other, activities and homework. And they find that after they make up for lost sleep by sleeping about 12 hours a night, they settle in at about 9.25. So that's what sleep scientists have identified as the sweet spot for teenage sleep, when in reality, like Heather said, they're just vastly underslept. Most teenagers, most high schoolers are getting closer to about 6 hours of sleep by the time they're seniors. So their sleep loss is really devastating. Sleep loss for teenagers has been on the decline for decades, but the advent of technology took it on a nosedive. And like you're mentioning, the pandemic really wreaked havoc also with teenager sleep. So we describe in Generation Sleepless, we describe a perfect storm of factors that steal teenagers' sleep. So the first one is just a natural delay in their sleep clock. their sleep clock is just naturally delayed. Their melatonin and their sleepiness hormones rise later in the evening, so they're just not tired as early as they used to be, up to about 2 hours, which means their bodies want to sleep that much longer in the morning to get the sleep that they need. So that's the first factor. Then you have just a ridiculous amount of homework and activities that teenagers have or feel pressured to do, whether it's to show up on their college app or to just the amount of homework they have to do takes them way into the evening. A lot of times they don't even get home until 6 or 7 at night. And then so they've got the natural delay, the homework, the activities, and then you've got technology, and technology takes this and runs with it and takes them even hours later into the night. So their bedtimes have gotten later and later and later. I mean, I never did 4 or 5 hours of homework when I was in high school, not even close. But then on the other end of their night, we have too early school start times, squeezing their sleep from the other end, which just gives you this mathematically impossible situation where they just literally don't have enough time to get the sleep that they need.
Wow. And for our listeners, so many of you I know are struggling with getting your kids out of bed. So to be able to have that understanding and empathy that this is tough because even their biological clocks aren't waking them up. I know our school has a late start now.
Oh, good.
And
what time is it?
I think they start now. My kids are out of high school, but I think it started at either 9 or 9:30.
Oh, that's great.
And yeah, and
That's one of the best we've heard.
Yeah, and we're from north of Chicago, and I think a lot of schools there are starting to do that.
Mhm.
And I think it was maybe Tuesday or Thursday, or might have been Monday, Wednesday, Friday. And so even the ways that they changed their class, the length of their class time in order to do that, they've been getting creative. Do you see that more schools are doing that now?
Some schools are, definitely more schools. I mean, unfortunately, it's been a slow build because organizations like Start School Later and different groups that have been trying to raise, awareness about this have been really working on this for like 20 years to say, hey, the sleep science is really showing us that teenagers biologically go to bed later and sleep later in the morning. The morning hours contain a lot of dream sleep or REM sleep, which is really important for emotional processing and learning and memory. So if you shave off those 2 hours in the morning and you expect, a 16-year-old to get up at 6 a.m., knowing that they need 2 more hours of REM sleep, you're basically depriving them of it's kind of like their overnight therapy. So they're not getting the emotional processing that they need, and their memory is impacted by those 2 hours. So that's been very clear from the science for a long time. And it's still really, it's slow going to get high schools to hear that and to really make changes. So a lot of states, well, I don't know about a lot of states, some states are considering doing it as a statewide legislation. So in California, starting this fall, high schools will not be able to start before 8:30, which is huge. I mean, for all high schools in California to make that shift is a huge public health initiative. So other states are considering it as well.
Wow. So it makes a lot of sense to me that this is a problem because, like you mentioned, I think it was you, Julie, that mentioned how there's, their homework load. They have more of a homework load, then you've got technology, and they're on their technology and they're trying to connect with their friends, and they've got FOMO and all of that. I even notice when I go to bed that I'm tempted to look at my phone just to unwind, like to kind of but it has the opposite effect. And so even last night, I was so tempted to look at it. I'm like, no, do not look at your phone. It affects my sleep. And so I can see for our kids, it becomes a habit too, that they're looking at their phones.
Yeah, well, it's a habit. It's also extremely addicting. I mean, that's why I think it's more than a habit. And I think, I don't know if you've heard about the recent, the European Union is enacting what it's kind of, they call it, it's sort of a dry title. It's called the Digital Services Act. But what it's designed to do is something that we would wish for so much in this country, which is asking technology companies to show their algorithms, to show what they're doing, to create more responsible design, to be more transparent so that they can be regulated the way the Food and Drug Administration regulates our food and our drugs. So we're just pouring content out into, the atmosphere, and children are consuming it without any regulation. And it's like, I feel like it's like we're all part of a big experiment, and nobody asked for this, and we're all feeling it. Everyone feels the pull of technology, and it's very insidious. And it is really especially alluring to teenagers who, by the end of being in school, being in activities, doing homework, they haven't had enough time to connect with their friends, to be social, to just hang out and be silly or chat, all of those things that everybody needs. So it makes sense that they want to go on their devices or just spaz out and play video games for a while. I mean, we all need downtime, but we'd much rather they have downtime with their friends outside after school, face to face, running around, hanging out, and not. Studies show that the time they spend on their devices trying to connect socially is not nearly as positive as if they were to get that social connection, and even connection within their families in other ways, in more, face-to-face kind of ways. So yeah, technology is a big part of the problem. In the book, we write a lot about how to change habits, how to set up new rituals and routines within the home, because it does take a lot of attention and a lot of working together and a lot of really listening to your teenagers and helping them become self-motivated to make these changes. It's not an easy thing to do, but we find that teenagers really like to learn about their brains and their bodies, and they like to learn about sleep, as long as you don't come at them in this, telling them what to do and what's good for them kind of way. If you really listen to what they care about, you can almost always find a way in that relates to sleep.
Yeah, well, I want to dig into that, but first, I just want to briefly talk a little bit more about what you were talking about, Heather, with the cost of this. Not to freak everybody out that's listening, because it does elicit some fear, like, oh my gosh, but you were mentioning that they're not getting that, what's it called, REM sleep in the morning. So then it's affecting their brains. What else are the studies showing?
Yeah.
What are some of the signs that maybe parents can be looking for?
Yeah, well, I think the first thing to know, and the most kind of relevant to right now, is that we hear a lot about the mental health crisis in teenagers. So more than 1 in 3 high schoolers reports feeling a persistent sense of sadness or helplessness. Thoughts of self-harm are way up from 10 years ago. It's truly, it's disturbing, and it tops every parent's concern list, I would say. And sleep and mental health are inextricably linked. So if teenagers are missing 2 hours of sleep every night, they are, essentially doubling the risk for depression. So if you are concerned about your teenager's mental health, absolutely the number one step right now is to look at their sleep. And 8 hours is what we would consider adequate sleep on a school night. So every night of the week, getting 8 hours of sleep is what we consider adequate. But 9 hours is actually optimal. Like Julie was saying, if you really let teenagers sleep as much as they'd like, most will sleep more like 9 or 9.5. So looking at just the number, the hour, sometimes it's hard for parents because they go to bed before their teenagers. So it's tricky, but counting the hours is actually the best way to figure it out. So mental health goes down risk of depression and thoughts of self-harm go way up when when kids are sleep deprived. And that's because sleep deprivation changes the brain. It activates the more negative reactive centers of the brain, and it kind of dulls down the frontal cortex. So we don't feel as much perspective, or we lose our judgment. We don't have as much of a soothing, sense from our frontal cortex, and instead our negative, frustration, sadness, anger are way up. So you can see that in brain scans when people are sleep deprived. So, when people feel like teens are grumpy or, moody, I mean, it's no surprise when they're sleeping 6 or 7 hours a night when they really need 9. I think mental health is kind of the number one thing that we see parents being concerned about, with good reason.
It makes so much sense. I mean, I even think when I'm not getting good sleep, how I act differently. You're just more,
Right.
I'm more reactive,
Yeah.
feel as good, more impatient.
And you feel kind of pessimistic, like you don't know how things are going to go. They don't seem like they can work out. You don't have as much creative energy for problem solving. You just feel kind of more hopeless. Whereas when you sleep well, you feel like you've got the brain energy to figure it out, and you feel more hopeful and more optimistic.
Yeah. Julie, would you add anything to that?
Well, yes, I was thinking it makes sense also because what happens is relationships suffer when we're feeling that way. It's hard to have good relationships. It's hard to interpret the things people say in a positive light. It's hard to make sense of things. So we see relationships suffer not only with friends, but also within the family. And, as parents, we all know what it's like to try to have a conversation with an exhausted teenager. So relationships suffer. The other things we see with sleep deprivation are more poor decision-making and risk-taking, more accidents, more car crashes, more substance abuse. I mean, it's literally the list of things that parents worry about are negatively affected by not getting enough sleep.
It seems like we're not talking about this enough.
Not at all.
Yeah.
Not at all.
We agree.
Yeah. That's why we need your book.
We couldn't not write this book, is how we felt. We just felt
Mhm.
like it was the missing link to so many issues, and not being thought about, not being prioritized. People just, they worry about so many things, and we understand that. They worry about their kids' happiness and their mental health, and are they going to get into a good college, and are they okay with their friends? But it's almost like people just forgot about sleep. Sleep got pushed to the bottom of the list. And I think a lot of people just think teenagers are like, not only like mini adults, but even more resilient maybe than adults. Like they could even get by on less sleep than an adult. I think people just don't really understand how important sleep is. And, we haven't even talked about this yet, but teenagers' brains are undergoing a massive period, a very distinct and massive period of restructuring and remodeling, which again, I think a lot of people don't realize that this is a really transformative time. It's very similar to the time we worry and so much about their sleep with, the 0 to 3 years when so much is going on with brain development. And it's a similar period for teenagers. So there are just a million reasons why sleep should be a priority. Heather and I often say, think of sleep as foundational to your being alive, like air and water and food and sleep. Because in reality, if we don't sleep, eventually we will die. Most of us don't get to that point, but sleep is foundational to every aspect of our health, both physical and mental.
Wow. And it seems like it's like we're treating the symptom, but we're not getting to the root cause. Like even with, and I'm not against medication, but things may just correct themselves, is what I'm hearing you say, with them getting more sleep.
It's
Well,
really
we want to
true.
do that first. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. which leads me, I want to share a question. And it's funny that this just came in and the other day. When they have, this is a mom asking me a question, when they have so much homework and a sport that is every day, how do we get them to get the sleep they need? It is all too much. It feels like something is going to break. Everyone is pushing themselves too hard. And so her question is, what do I do to get my kid to go to bed and get the sleep they need when they've got all this homework, they're playing a sport? What would you say a few of the things that they can begin to implement in their homes?
Well, so I think that the way to look at it from a bigger perspective is that perfect storm that Julie was talking about, because the homework and the activities and the technology all play into it. And then you've got some more practical things that parents can do at home. So we basically like to spread the responsibility out. We don't want parents to feel like this is all on them and they have to fix it. So that's why we do presentations for high schools, and why we talk to sports coaches, and why there's a lot of information in the book about, how LeBron James uses sleep to increase his sports performance. Like, sleep is important to athletic performance, and sleep loss is the number one predictor of sports injury. So if you have an athlete who's a high school athlete, and their coach is not talking about sleep, their coach is missing some information. So that's where the Generation Sleepless is not just about making parents get their kids to bed. It's about calling everybody out on their role in not allowing teenagers healthy sleep. So I would say, if you're a sports coach or a PE coach or, a club coach, you have a responsibility for making sleep a priority and talking to your athletes about that. And, there's swim meets that start at 6 a.m. Right. So there's something really wrong with that, because it doesn't actually work for their athletic performance. So I think that's part of it, is that we have to spread the responsibility out. We have to talk to high schools about limiting homework. But also, teens do tend to procrastinate because of their technology. So what feels like 3 hours of homework sometimes can be, oh, wait a minute, we have to talk about healthy boundaries with technology, because you've got your phone in your room while you're trying to do a paper, and then your friend's texting you, and then you're not really focused. So there's healthy, there's good boundaries around time management and study habits. And then we've got the routines that you need to actually allow your sleep chemistry to unfold. So you want to look at a wind down routine. In Generation Sleepless, we have wind down routine, bedtime routine, and morning routine. And they're actually all super important. They create what we call the sleep bubble. So you want to have a wind down, you want to have a bedtime routine, and you also want to have a morning routine. And on the weekends, you want to get up within an hour or two maximum of the time you get up during the week. This is something that parents can look at to help teenagers fall asleep more easily during the week. You want to get them up within 1 to 2 hours on Saturday and Sunday from when they have to get up during the week, and get sunshine at that time, or just be outside, even sun through the clouds. So I think for a parent who's understandably like, what do I do about this? It has to be a holistic, you kind of want to look at it holistically. But the things you can do immediately in your home are set those 3 routines up and talk to your teen about it. Get their buy-in to work on what time they wake up in the morning on the weekends, and talk about technology boundaries, because that is one of the number one things that's keeping them up. Most of them have their phones in their room. A lot of them actually have their phones on their pillow.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. What time should they hand in their phones, do you think? I get that one a lot.
Well, one of the things Heather and I say is, if you have a younger teen, like a tween or a middle schooler, don't let go of those rules and those boundaries, whether, maybe it all depends on what time they have to wake up in the morning. But let's say your, 14-year-old has to, be in bed by 10 o'clock to get would that work? 9 hours?
That's what time my 14-year-old gets in bed.
Okay.
I mean, he gets
Okay,
in bed at
perfect.
9:30, but he gets in bed at 9:30, turns out the light at 10, but he has to put his phone away at 8. But that's me. I mean, so that's 2 hours before his bedtime is when he puts his phone away, and he doesn't have, so that's the 2-hour buffer. And then then he has a bedtime routine that's like a half hour long or so. He reads and then he shuts off the light at 10, and he has to wake up around 7.
How nice that he reads. You know, a
Mhm.
lot of kids aren't reading anymore
know.
because of the phone too.
Mhm.
Well, Heather, how did you get him to do that? Of course, you're a sleep consultant and psychotherapist, so I'm sure that you started this early on. But parents get a lot of
Yeah.
pushback, and so
Yeah.
and a lot of fighting. And working with parents myself, I'm hearing that. Well, I keep telling them they have to hand it in, and then they're resisting me, and they don't want to hand it in, and it gets, I'm always going and knocking on their door. You're supposed to hand it in by 9:30, and you're not, and
Yeah.
or I need my alarm clock,
Mhm.
for the
Yep.
morning, or I like to listen to music to wind down. So,
Yeah, there's so many. You're naming all the ones that's exactly all the things. I think well, my son has never not known this is a way of life. So that's where we say to, like, if you have an elementary schooler, don't ever let it be a thing that you start doing where they have their phone in their room. Just keep what you think are extra, you know, extra, just do more than you think you need to do, because it's hard to rein them back. It's hard to get back to those healthy habits once you've let go. But it's not that it's not possible. I would say that when you have a wind down routine that doesn't involve screens, the way to think about it is not just getting rid of your screens, but what are you adding that is fun? Because it doesn't mean that we can't have fun or we can't do things we enjoy before bed. So think about if we put our phones away, but the whole family watches a movie or watches a TV show, or does something that everybody enjoys, just walk the dog or play cards, like do something that's actually enjoyable. And you can watch a movie together in the living room. If you make it a draw to come out of your room and do something with a family and let your phones go, then it's better than just saying, like, you can't be on your devices and just trying to take them away. So just think about adding some fun things to do during the wind down time.
oh, yeah, I love that. Rather than just trying to take it away, be
Exactly.
able to replace it with something positive.
Yeah. And that really depends on what your kids are into. I mean, you could do charades. The easiest thing is just to watch a TV show. So find one that you all like, find some kind of like reality show that's fun, like, find something the whole family is into, and just make that a priority and put the phones away before that, so that there's something fun to come to.
Yeah, love that. Julie, do you have any other thoughts that you'd like to add?
Yeah, well, everything that Heather said is really helpful. I think when we work with families, we hear from teenagers that their parents are on their phones all the time, and we hear from families that parents kind of give up, and so they go into their room and they get on their device, and their teenagers in the other room, and everybody's kind of off in their own separate corner. So we find it's really helpful to talk honestly with your teenager about your own technology use and your own sleep. And if you can do that and come to some, realizations, that things that you want to change about your own sleep as a parent, then you can work with your teenager and say, listen, I'm going to park my device at 9:30, let's all park our devices, and then let's create some new rituals. Let's, do something fun, or everybody can have time to read, even if people don't want to come together. I mean, everybody's going to want to do different things sometimes, but I think parents model the use of technology, and they also model poor sleep habits often. And I think it helps a lot to talk about sleep as a family. We even put forward in the last chapter of the book a sleep challenge. So a family can take the challenge of, a group of friends or a sports team or a theater group or whatever can take the sleep challenge, and it can be fun to kind of take the challenge and then check back in after a week or two and see how everybody did and how they're feeling. So I think it's like with any really addictive habit, it's hard at first to change, but if you stick to it long enough, now you're creating a new habit, a new, healthier, more desired habit. And we can do that. We can change our habits. And we also like to talk to teenagers about big tech and how they don't have teenagers' best interests at heart, and give them that feeling like you're getting the behind the scenes idea here of these companies. All they want is your money and your attention, and they don't care about you. So talking to them in a way of sort of helping them feel like they have a little bit of an inside scoop on what's going on here. I think some teenagers really like that angle too, and feeling like, hey, I want to control my technology. I don't want it to control my life, you know?
Yeah, Social Dilemma is a good movie to watch together. Gosh, that was powerful.
Yeah.
Yeah, just seeing how it's all working behind the scenes to create that just that addiction to your phone, and to, yeah, suck you into it.
I mean, imagine sending your kid to bed with like a tray of beer and a pile of, I don't know, weed or something. I mean, you just wouldn't send your kid to bed with a bunch of substance, addicting things, You also wouldn't give them a big old mug of coffee, at bedtime. But technology is really something that we just haven't really linked it as we should to something that should be dealt with in a very, treated with a lot of, what's the word for it? We want to be judicious about it and really thoughtful and use it in a really informed way. We don't want to demonize it. We're not going to get rid of it, but we want to be in control of it,
Mm-hmm. And I love including yourself in the process, like modeling, because that is true. Like, have your kid handed in at 9, but you're on your phone, and saying, let's all have the sleep challenge. I love that idea. And then talking about how differently you feel. Like, that was what kept me off my phone last night. I'm like, I feel so much better when I get good sleep. Like, my brain, everything works better.
Yeah. Plus, you can't fall asleep if you've just been on your device.
Yeah.
The light, the activation, and the engagement, which creates a state of flow, all of those things make it very difficult to then just lie down in bed and expect to be able to fall asleep.
Yeah. Well, any closing words? I really think, you're making me feel so passionate about this, just with the connections of how important sleep is, and like giving them beer or weed before they go to bed. In a way, it's going to affect them. And yet we don't think about sleep in the same way. So very powerful to think about. And in your book, you share a lot of ideas how to create that connection, because we're so isolated. So I really want to recommend to our listeners to get your book and how to engage and talk about these things, because we do need help, and how to have these important conversations and those positive things that we can replace the technology with. So they want to connect, they want to be with us and engaging more in the positive. So I love that. Any parting words?
I think, we would love for people to get the book, to talk about the book, to share it with people, who are in their high school and on their sports teams and in their communities, and not just think of this like a parenting book, or, because there's a lot of really cool stuff about the teenage brain in this book. It's really looking at this from a lot of different angles. And at the same time, Julie and I cannot help ourselves from being very practical and very user-friendly. So the book, almost every other page has a takeaway or a little, a tip or something that you can actually use. Just check out the book. And our website is thehappysleeper.com. That's our first book about babies and little kids, The Happy Sleeper.
And they can find it there.
Yes. And anywhere books are sold. But yes, our website is The Happy Sleeper.
And that's your Facebook page as well.
We actually don't really have a Facebook page, although, well, we sort of do, but we mostly use Instagram.
Okay, because I think I found you on Facebook. And,
Okay. Well, that's good.
and you had posted, like, because I saw Happy Sleeper, but you had just like had a post
Oh, wonderful. That's
today.
good.
And
Our Instagram posts automatically post on our Facebook.
okay, very good. Because I was like, oh, they have baby stuff here, some things, but a lot of stuff for
Yeah.
teenagers and about your book. That is why. Okay, and mostly on Instagram. Also, what are you doing? I mean, are you speaking to schools? This could be like, I'm imagining you're trying to bring about changes. Are you talking to schools or?
We are. We actually spoke to a group of students at Yale a few weeks ago, and that was just so, the students were so engaged and they were so thoughtful and they were so tired, and it was clear to us that this is definitely an issue for college students as well. But yeah, we're speaking to several schools in the near future, and we'd love to speak to more.
Okay, good to know, because we need that third party influence,
Mhm.
like the coaches, and talking to them about how to be able to share that with your kids. So it's not just coming from the parents that I
Yeah.
almost, when you were sharing, I was thinking, like Moms Against Drunk Drivers. That's
Yeah.
what I was thinking this is like, where you're raising our awareness and our consciousness that this is really important stuff. So
Mm.
thank you for what you're doing.
Thank you
Yeah,
so much. This was great.
Drowsy driving is very similar to drunk driving
Yeah.
too. Heather and I, we say, you wouldn't hand your keys to your teenager if you knew she'd been drinking, but we hand our keys to tired, sleep-deprived teenagers all the time.
Wow.
So it is. Heather and I fantasize like a round table with big tech here, college admissions here, high schoolers here, state legislatures here, and just, sitting down and saying, we can't leave this room until we solve this. And I think another parting word is that the cool thing about this is that it's fixable. This is not a problem that we cannot solve. It's a solvable issue.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
the good.
I picture it. I think that, you're bringing change, and that's really very encouraging. So I know a lot of, our listeners are going to want to get that book and read it and be able to make these changes in their homes. So thank you for coming on and sharing with us.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. This was fun.